Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is a BritCham Presents session on how global mobility promotes fair and diverse talent management. My name is David Kelly, and I'm the Executive Director here at the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. I'd first like to start by thanking our event partners for today, Crown World Mobility, for joining us and for sharing their insights on global mobility and a range of often overlooked areas such as common law partnerships, qualifications and childcare, as we unpick and seek to understand the 5 trends that global mobility and immigration experts are working towards. This is another interactive session, so if you would like to ask our panel of experts a question today, please post your questions using the dedicated Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar, and I'm sure we will try and address these throughout the session. The session will also be available on our on-demand section of the website and social channels soon after today as well. So with that, I would now like to hand over and welcome Francois Xavier Groslo, Business Development Director for APAC at Crown World Mobility, to kick off the session. FX, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, David, for this introduction. Good morning, everyone. Welcome today to this session. We are happy to propose this live panel discussion in partnership with the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. My name is Francois Xavier Groslo, and I'm the Director of Business Development for Asia at Crown World Mobility. Our theme today is about ED&I in the mobile and global workforce, and how global mobility contributes to a fair, diverse, and equitable talent management strategy. The challenges faced by organizations reflect the broader systemic changes which have impacted the world of business and corporate for the past few years. With younger generations of professional men and women entering the workforce, their aspirations and expectations from their career are different from the older generations. Equal opportunities from women to take on roles traditionally only given to men to have top jobs across the world and climb the corporate ladder are becoming more and more the norm, making the global workforce more diverse. Equally, young generations' priorities and changes from the traditional family model of the past must be considered to facilitate and support equal opportunities. Single parents, recomposed families, same-sex couples, dual career aspirations, all those are today's scenarios supported by global mobility and HR functions to contribute to supporting employees' experience and business strategy and supporting a accompanied partner. So before we dive into this topic with our panelists, I want to ask you to please look out for our QR code at the end of today's event. Your feedback and input are important to us and help us plan future events. So that's in addition to the BritCham feedback form that they will also share with you. So we really appreciate the time you will be use to fill up this form. And also, please do share your questions during the event, and we'll take some time at the end to answer them. So, to introduce our session, let me share some perspective on today's topic. From the recent Deloitte Global Mobility Trends paper, when we talk about systemic changes in the workforce, we have observed for some time now 3 main trends in the workforce, which impact the international mobility of talents. So, the first trend, 53% of LGBT employees are not fully out at work, while 39% were reported as turning down assignment for fear of a backlash. And 61% of employers are unaware of conditions in countries of operation. Second trend, family concerns are #1 reason for assignment refusal and assignment failure, and mobility practices often lag in applying changing definition of families. Lastly, although women represent more than 40% of the global workforce, only 1 in 5 international assignees are women. So 3 trends which have impact on the accompanied partner, our main theme today in the context of mobile workforce. As organizations, businesses, or HR professionals, we understand the needs to support a fair and diverse workforce, and that includes accompanied partner. This means working on supporting new solutions and ways of working to face these challenges. immigration challenges, facilitating the right type of application while remaining compliant. The second one is about career challenges, to overcome the first reason for not going on assignment or choosing not to go on assignment. And third one is about mental health and well-being, not forgetting partners and families once the settling in period has passed. By tackling and answering those challenges, then overall will contribute to a more equal and diverse mobile workforce by supporting those accompanying partners facing those challenges. So we therefore want to look at this at three key questions and topics and open them to the panel for them to share their experience on how those questions are influencing their organization, their roles, their teams, or their clients. So now I'm happy to introduce you to today's facilitator, Caitlin Piet. Caitlin is our Director of Account Management for Asia. She started her career in London, working in investment banking as global mobility specialist. In 2012, she relocated from London to Singapore to commence a role as part of the global mobility leadership team for a large engineering services company as their policy and practice manager. In this role, she honed her expertise in strategic mobility policy design and development and took responsibility for vendor selection and management. Following 5 years in Singapore, she relocated to Hong Kong in 2017 and switched from an in-house focus to a provider role in her current role now. Caitlin, I'm going to hand these things over to you now to introduce our great panelists.
Okay, thanks, Samesex, for that welcome, and welcome to all the panelists that have joined us and the participants that have joined us. Just before we kick off, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the panelists that we have today. So panelists, if I could ask you please to turn on your video so we can all see your lovely faces. Okay, so first of all, I'm very pleased to welcome Rani Nandan. Rani is Diversity and Inclusion Director at Page Group. And in this role, Rani is responsible for developing and deploying Page Group's diversity and inclusion strategy across the APAC region. Building on the framework she has successfully delivered across Australia in the past 6 years. Prior to moving into this role, Rani has 15 years HR experience across a wide variety of sectors. So welcome, Rani. Thanks for joining us today. Next is Debbie Bainon. Debbie is our Regional Immigration Manager here at Crown. She's based in Bangkok. She's been with Crown since 2015, and she oversees our immigration service delivery across the APAC region. Debbie has a long and illustrious career in immigration. She worked for many years for the UK Foreign Office, managing immigration services for UK diplomats in locations such as Sudan, Bangladesh and Pakistan. So thank you, Debbie, for joining us today. And finally, we have Shamila Raghuvaran. Shamila is a Regional Account Manager at Crown. She's based in Singapore, and she manages some of our key accounts for major clients across the APAC region. She's been with Crown for 15 years, so she's an extremely experienced account manager. And prior to moving to Singapore, she has previously worked in Malaysia, Dubai and Hong Kong. So welcome, Sean. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so the first topic we have, to kick off our discussion today, we're going to start with a look back at the past and some of the changes and trends that we've observed in recent years around how the demographics of mobile talent are changing and how their aspirations are evolving. So to start off with, Debbie, I'd like to come to you first, if I may, to set the scene in terms of the immigration landscape for accompanying partners and families and the changes that you've seen in the past 5 years across APAC. So specifically, what changes in requests from corporates have you seen over the past 5 years? And have you seen that immigration is becoming more complex to manage as a result of these changes?
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. The challenges in immigration are increasing. The expectation of fairness, equality and diversity, which is now so strong in some regions of the world, is not always easy to meet where old traditions and belief systems remain in place. APAC is one of these locations, and change is moving at a slower pace. Family makeup has changed. And that said, the non-acceptance of anything other than traditional family units make it very difficult for those who are unmarried or same-sex couples to take advantage of immigration benefits and also to then work. As recently as the 21st of February this year, the South Korean government announced plans to expand the definition of a family, but same-sex couples will be excluded from that definition. And this is starting to make it much more difficult for countries in this region to attract more talent from the West. Where we're getting inquiries, our clients are looking for more flexible immigration options, significant inquiries, especially more recently, around remote work from anywhere, virtual assignments, very much concerns around business traveling. Inquiries again, can partners work on dependent visas while in a host location? Generally, a dependent visa will not allow you to do that. In some locations, Australia, New Zealand, a partner on a dependent visa can work, but in the majority of locations, the inquiries are around, can partners work and do they need their own work permits? Existing childcare arrangements, we get a lot of inquiries around existing childcare arrangements. Can existing childcare be taken to a new location? That's very much an APAC tradition, where maybe if somebody's based in a location where they can have a helper or childcare, can they take that childcare with them to another location? And generally the answer to that is no. Some senior executives are allowed to take childcare with them, but generally not. And another question that we're getting a lot around is permanent residence. This is particularly linked with Australia and New Zealand, but generally the experience we're having is that countries are tightening up. The route to permanent residence is now closing for employment visa holders, and you have to look at other options as to whether or not permanent residence can be achieved. And again, very much visas and work permits are being linked to the roles specifically. Inquiries, we get a lot of inquiries around specific roles. Do they meet the requirements of a work permit? Can it link to a specific occupation list where those lists exist? And it is becoming increasingly challenging to match roles that clients want to have in a specific location to the requirements of an individual country.
Great, Debbie. So you shared with us there, and you've mentioned a few individual countries. Taking APAC as a whole, would you say that we are moving towards a more open environment in this region?
I think in some locations, yes, and we will come to this. We will come to this a little bit later on. We are seeing some countries realizing that to attract the talent that they need, they are going to need to change their immigration regulations around the family makeup, around diversity, definitely. Yeah. But then again, in other locations, there's still a lot of tradition, and the answer, or even maybe perhaps religious reasons why some of these different family makeups cannot be accepted, and it will take longer for those countries, I think, to change.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. That really helps to set the scene. So I'd like to move on now to Rani. Rani, in your various roles in HR over the past 6 years with Page Group, and prior to your current role as D&I Director for APAC, it would be great to get an overview from you of the trends that you've seen developing either within Page Group or more generally in the countries and markets and functions that you've worked in as an HR leader. So, for example, I understand that you developed and implemented a D&I framework in Australia before you took on your current role, and it'd be great for us to hear a little bit more about that, and specifically what were the drivers for those changes?
Yeah, certainly. I think, honestly, I could talk for the next hour just on that particular question, but I'll hold back. Firstly, thank you so much. I think this is such an important topic to be discussing. There are certainly some structural barriers and legislative issues that we don't necessarily have control over, but it's starting with these conversations and the advocacy work of the British Chamber, as well as organisations like Crown, that can help us to change this for good. So you talked about over the past 6 years, what have been some of the trends and topics. I have worked for our Australian business, for our Japan business, and now, as you say, I'm in an APAC based role. Look, I think there are so many trends that have been topical during that time. But if I think about the two big ones, would be just from an HR perspective, retention and employee experience, and everything else flows from that. So the other topics that I think have really been trending, and even more so recently, as you rightly say, diversity and inclusion, well-being, employee well-being, irrespective of where they are, where they're working, what their job is, and of course, flexibility. As we talk more and more about the hybrid workforce, flexibility becomes a massive draw card for retaining talent. And I think as it pertains to this topic today, the other piece that's I think quite relevant is this concept of returning talent. So as we talk about attracting global talent, we're in a situation where there are many countries across APAC where it is becoming increasingly difficult to sponsor expats. So how do we as an organisation, and how do we help our clients to attract returnees of local talent? And I think that's a massive piece to this puzzle. And also allows us to be a little bit more flexible in the offering and the benefits that we can give for non-traditional families. If I go to your question, Caitlin, around what was the D&I framework that we set up in Australia? Look, I think it's really nice to work for a recruitment firm. So we have a unique opportunity to foster D&I within our own organisation, foster that with our clients, but also have an impact on society. So we think about D&I in a 3-pillar model, and that is 1, setting an example. What are we doing internally to actually lead the way? 2, pushing boundaries. What are we doing with our clients to help them make change? And then 3, what are we doing to shape the future? And what are we doing as linked to our sustainability agenda and the broader society at large? So in Australia, and as you said, I started 6 years ago. We started simple. And what I would say, advice for anybody starting out on the D&I journey, is really start to think about what you want to achieve and what impacts you want to have. So we started by establishing employee network groups, and we did that quite slowly. So we have quite a number of network groups now, but they have evolved over time. Our longest standing one is certainly Women at Page, and that's commenced 10 years ago now. And we've evolved that over time. So each of those network groups has their own vision, their own strategy, their own dedicated action plan as to what impact they want to have. As an HR function, we then spent time reviewing our own internal policies, our procedures, our systems, and we worked with the business to create a culture of psychological safety. And I think that's a really important piece when it comes to driving an inclusive agenda. Separate to that, and I think really important, we spent a lot of time on education and on bias training, bringing that front of mind to people, and in doing that, not just for our own employees, but constantly engaging and partnering and educating our clients. So for us as an organisation, D&I is really part of our DNA. It's a key piece of our employee value proposition, and it really links to our purpose as an organisation. And it might sound like a platitude, but we are a values-driven organisation, and that really comes through in the experience of our employees and hopefully that of our clients and customers.
Brilliant, thanks, Rani. So did you find that the new framework you've just spoken about, did that influence the appetite of the business to go further and do more in the realm of equal opportunities within mobility?
Certainly, as it comes to mobility, I think that the two are intertwined. And for us, we primarily and historically have been an organically grown business. So that link between inclusion and global mobility has been a big part of our journey and our employee experience for a very long time. So as we've opened up new markets, as we've opened up new offices, we have tended to look for high-performing aspirational employees from other parts of the world to help us to recreate the Page culture in that new local environment. So in and of itself, that system and that structure and process enables us to offer movement for people at more junior levels. So immediately you're opening up the pool of talent, because it's not just about the senior executives. It's not just about the people with the most tenure. It's not. So we're then creating a cohort of people who are moving globally that have varying ages, varying marital status, at varying tenure with us, which in and of itself helps to promote diversity and inclusion within that group.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much for those insights, Rani. That's really helpful. Now I'd like to come to Sharmila. So, Sham, you've got huge length of experience, as I mentioned at the start, 15 years with Crown alone. So, during all the time that you've been managing corporate accounts and supporting mobility, maybe you can tell us what changes you've observed over the years in terms of corporates giving equal opportunities to all talents to be able to go on assignments.
Thanks, Caitlin. Yes, as you rightly said, that I've seen the change or the shift in the trend, what corporates have been doing. So one of the key drivers for this is changing workforce demographics and shifting geopolitical landscapes have created talent shortages and skill gaps, I would say, in the last decade or so. So organizations have come to realize that success hinges heavily on having the right talent at the right place and at the right time. So many of mature global mobility team, they have started modifying the way that they operate. They have adjusting the program that they do just by broadening their talent pools. Over the last 5 years or so, many companies have implemented robust selection planning. This includes the blind screening, and one of the clients that I work with, they have also included a diversify hiring boards just to make sure that they have insights from every level of people that's part of the hiring. So what this has done has actually helped them to uncover the non-visible minorities, the likes of LGBT population, those with disabilities, and pave a way for them for equal opportunities. So speaking on that, I have just another example when European-based financial institutions have adjusted their policies for candidate selection. What Rani was just explaining, that they are giving that opportunity for the earlier career people. So their research revealed that not many senior female talent would want to relocate when they have school-age children. As a result, what they have done is they began identifying high potential female talent at more junior levels and offering them the opportunities at the stage where it suits them best with the work-life progression. And then on another aspect of family issues, we all know that family support has been recognized for many years as a crucial part of a success of an assignment, and it's also an integral part of repatriation for someone who's returning back to their home countries. So this includes educational issues with the children, dual career support for working partners, health and well-being of extended family members. So on this context, what I've been observing is many companies have started including or providing support with training adjustments on a note of providing intercultural training for the spouses and also for children. In the past, this used to be on an exception basis, but now a lot of companies are moving to make it as a mandatory program for them so that they could adapt quickly in the host and also in the home location when they return back. And I also want to share some example what's happening in extended family members. I mean, I'm seeing this with one or two clients of mine where they have started recognizing the extended family members who are like parents and parents-in-law And we understand that this is quite challenging with the legislation in some countries, but they are making that change. They are trying to be the game changer by recognizing them and providing whatever assistance that they could in terms of supporting with immigration, providing insurance coverage, and in some instances, I've seen that they are also providing added financial assistance to the employee. So this is definitely what I've been seeing that has changed over the years.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sharman. I think your last point there is really interesting, because if I think back to some of my previous roles in-house, where I used to work in-house, and that very issue came up, I think only about 5 or 6 years ago, where someone wanted to extend their benefits to their elderly parents, and it was just completely out of the question. There was no way that my
Correct.
company was going to approve that. But now we're starting to see that happening. So it's a real change around, isn't it?
That's correct, and I think it's a great example that the company trying to include everyone that's defined under the family or partner category.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Shan. Okay, we're going to move on to our second topic now, which is to pick up from what Shan was just saying, focusing on the issue of the accompanying partner and what that looks like today. So we're going to talk about this for roughly the next 15 minutes. So Rani, I'd like to come to you first. And I'm sure that the workforce at Page Group is seeing the same changes that we've been discussing generally. So the rise of women on assignments, unmarried couples, excuse me, same-sex partners. Do you think that in order to enable fair mobility amongst all of your talent that you have in the company, accompanying partners must be part of that D&I agenda? And specific question, how does your organization define accompanying partner?
Great questions, Caitlin. Look, as I mentioned before, we try to embed a D&I approach and a D&I lens in everything that we do, and that includes global mobility. It also includes our talent succession and development programs. So to Shamila's point before, when we're starting to think about career planning, career succession planning, looking for high potentials and what are their opportunities and how do we stretch them, that's when we're starting to have these conversations to ensure that we are putting a diverse talent pool through that process. When it comes to defining an accompanying partner, look, we don't have an official definition, but we've actually done that deliberately. We don't want to exclude. We want to start from a place of yes. And what I would say, most recently when I was the HR lead for Australia, we actually went out of our way to explicitly include same-sex partners in the policy, and we did that deliberately again because we know that the LGBT community tend to read themselves out of policies, and so it was really important for us to specify that in the entitlements. So I think the biggest barrier for us as an organisation remains the local legislation. So while we can say accompanying partner includes common law relationships or de factos, it includes same-sex couples, that will be country specific. We've certainly had examples of unmarried couples travelling. We've had a small number of same-sex couples leaving APAC, not necessarily coming into APAC. That's a little bit of a challenge in itself. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this current focus on returning locals. So how do we get more locals back into the APAC market? That's a massive opportunity for us, because if they already have residency or citizenship, the visa and the legislation piece is not so much of a problem. The relocation and all of the services that we get through Crown comes irrespective of whether they're married or not.
Okay, great. So are there any specific initiatives or examples you can share with us on the ways in which Page Group has supported accompanying partners to ensure that they're also part of that successful international assignment?
Again, it's a case-by-case basis, but what we try to do is assess what does the accompanying partner wish to do when they arrive? And how do we make sure that they have a purpose? Because what we know is that if the accompanying partner is not happy and settled and quickly, that it actually impacts the entire move and the entire relocation. So that's a really critical question to ask at the very outset of when you're assessing a relocation of that nature. So where possible, we would explore work permits. As we mentioned before, that is going to be country specific in terms of the legislation, but where possible, we would definitely support that work permit. Where we have local returnees, if they're returning with a non-local partner, we would look for ways in which to support their entry to the country. So in Australia, for instance, we've had examples where an Australian is returning, we don't need to sponsor them, but we might help to support their partner to have a partner visa so that they can remain in the country. And that way we know that that immediately brings that sense of stability to both parties moving across. And that only works in our favor. As a recruitment company, it's kind of neat that we can also then offer, once somebody does have a work permit, we've got the kind of bundle there to be able to help them find work once they get on the ground as well. Through Crown, we certainly advocate and have certain levels who would have access to home and school searches, look-see trips, which again helps with settling the accompanying partner as quickly as possible. We offer our employee assistance program to the partner, again, irrespective of whether that is in a hetero or a same-sex relationship. And more recently, we've started a buddy program. So when we have somebody moving into a country, we'll try to buddy them with another person at a similar level or a similar experience in terms of whether they're non-local, local, to have a local touch point that can talk them through, hey, how did you find the transition from this country to this country? What were the biggest challenges? And through that, we encourage that if they do have partners, that they buddy their partners up as well. And those are the, I suppose, various avenues that we take. But without a doubt, it is very critical to get the partner settled and stable as soon as possible.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ronnie. There's some great practical examples there that I hope have been useful for everyone. Okay, so Sharmila, back to you. You shared with us earlier some changes that you've observed and some of the challenges that you faced in your role with corporate clients. So I wanted to focus a little more on HR policies now and ask you, in your experience, how do corporates define accompanying partners in their policies today? And have you observed any differences in the degrees of D&I friendly approach amongst your clients?
Thanks, Caitlin. So I must say that all corporates are in the same journey, but some are more advanced than others. So the simple answer to your question is yes, of course, the language is changing to make sure the assumption it's just not wife. So accompanying partner, it's a term that's broadly being used by majority of the corporates, that it's enough to include all type of partners. However, most policy on accompanying partners continues to be driven by the immigration legislation in the host country that they're going to. It is the local government that determine who's eligible to be recognized as spouse and partner, but companies are open to recognizing that families' demographics are not one size fits all anymore, and that their policies need to address the challenge of barriers or realities of a diverse set of employee situation. So just to share an example, a client of mine from a large pharma company, they're actually providing mandatory 8 weeks leave for non-birthing parents. So this is a great example of inclusiveness that they're fostering in their workplace, which it's a great example, I must say.
Brilliant. Okay. So as you said, all corporates are on the same journey, but they're not necessarily in the same place along that journey. And just touching on the past 18 months, obviously we've had a really odd couple of years with COVID, and a lot of companies have had to make changes to their policies and switch things around a little bit to accommodate the impact of the pandemic. Have you seen any changes that have been made in terms of HR policies which have contributed to the D&I agenda? So either in a positive way, i.e. they've really helped to enhance it, or in a negative way that they've set it back a little bit?
Yep, certainly, Caitlin. COVID has made the needle forward on several issues, including ED&I. So a lot of employees want to work in companies where they can be themselves, where their personal life, it's not expected to be left outside of the workplace. So most employees, there is an assumption that ED&I, it's important and just not an aspiration about it. So ED&I has moved more in the last 2 years in comparison to the last 10 years, I would say, being on the agenda. While in mobility, we continue to struggle with how to diversify the assignee population, virtual assignments are giving the employees the opportunities to gain international experience without leaving their home location. In short, these short-term experiences allow more employees who might never get offered or be able to go on an assignment. So to gain that experience, really. So of course, with COVID, things are moving in the right direction for certain group of people. And another important aspect is educating managers who are selecting assignees to make sure they are aligned with the company's ED&I policies and agenda, because that is an important goal for them to make sure who gets to go on assignment and what support they would receive or what support they'll be providing. Sharing a real example, a few months ago, our consulting services team worked with one of my clients, it's a big telco company, to review their policies from D&I lenses. So they said, okay, Crown, I need you to review my policies on a D&I lenses and let us know what's happening, what we could improve, what are the languages that we need to change and everything. So we have done that. We have shared some best practices for them to make that initial change that's required. And just earlier this week, there was another client that came to us. They were from chemical and consumer goods and wanted to understand what others are doing to support an early career employee experience, just to help diversify their leadership pipeline. So it was good to understand where they are heading to as an organization and how they plan to make assignments more appealing to more diverse talent pool and their plans to retain and nurture their younger population. So what we did, it was a very quick turnaround time. So we had helped them articulate their new business drivers for the new strategy and shared high-level examples on what they could do, what are the initial steps that they could take. In a nutshell, I must say COVID has made many companies to reset, review their mobility and D&I policies, and they want to definitely push mobility's agenda to be more strategic than just transactional. That's my view on that, Caitlin.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point and a really good takeaway, actually, because we tend to think that COVID has been so horribly negative, but I think at least in this one space, we've seen that it has advanced the D&I agenda. So thanks for that, Sean.
Definitely.
Debbie, if I could come back to you before we move on to our last topic. Obviously, we're all global mobility professionals. We all understand the importance of compliance and the various risks when it comes to cross-border assignments. And you earlier shared with us an overview of the immigration landscape for accompanying partners. So obviously everyone on the call will be aware that social norms and cultural differences will vary between countries and regions. But taking a sort of high-level overview, what initiatives or best practices have you experienced in this arena?
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. I think the first point, which has already been made by both Rani and Shamila and yourself, is that the current pandemic is an example of how events are beyond the control of any business. Nobody has had any control over this. And what we've seen over the past 18 months particularly is that countries have made some very highly protective immigration decisions in relation to allowing people to enter or not to enter. And this has included instances where in specific locations, they have opened up to allow assignees to go back, but then have stopped dependents going back. And that is an example. China is an example of this. And from an initiative perspective, what we've been trying to do is lobby through our partners, our clients as well, lobby the government to explain that if they need the talent back in the country, in a lot of cases, that does involve allowing dependents to go back as well. as everyone has said, you know, dependents are part of a big family, and they are really important when it's involving people going. And again, from an immigration perspective, they've put barriers in place to allow those dependents to go back, and we've had to kind of work around those barriers in order to allow those dependents to return. Other initiatives I've seen is that we did have one big client who was based in Europe, who came to us and said, we want to relocate our headquarters in APAC. But what we want to do is we want to be really sure that we are going to be able to relocate our employees with, you know, in that location. And so basically we were given a list of 9 countries, and the questions around immigration were, can partners work? Can unmarried partners get visas? Can same-sex couples go to that location? And again, as an extension to that, can they work? So a lot of planning, I think, is starting to be made now around the ED&I arena. And that was quite a big project that we did very recently, actually, for that particular client. What we're also seeing from an initiative perspective is pressure within different countries around the acceptance of what is now not a normal family unit as they see it. We have Hong Kong that is now allowing same-sex partners to go into Hong Kong as dependents. That is a result of a court case that happened in 2018. In 2019, Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage. So there are now 30 countries from which people who have got a legal same-sex marriage in their home location can go in. And very, very recently, again, pressure internally, the Philippines announced that they will start to consider the legalization of same-sex marriage, and also to allow dependents to go in. So that's quite an important watch for us, because that was only in September. Another really important initiative that we're seeing is the pressure for the harmonization of qualifications. Obviously, dependents want to go with their partners, and in a lot of cases, they want to work. So does the immigration landscape allow them to do that? And what we're seeing in a lot of locations is that they are having difficulty applying for work visas in their own right, because the qualifications that are acceptable in the home location are not acceptable in the host location. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around the harmonization of qualifications. Another initiative that's coming through is what we're calling digital nomad visas. So countries are recognizing that to attract talent, some of the immigration regulations in place at the moment are not allowing the talent that's needed to go into the country. And that includes the accompanying partners. And so with these digital nomad visas, it's more around relatively easy qualifications in relation to, you know, have you got health insurance and have you got the right amount of earnings? But also then it means that people in their own right can go as a visa holder. So that allows families, maybe partners who want to work, to be able to look at that option. We've got 2 locations in APAC that are starting to look at this. One is Bali and one is Sri Lanka. But there are around 10 or 12 countries globally that are now looking at that. But again, another initiative to try and attract the talent and expand those options for other people, for partners that can't qualify normally, to actually obtain visas to allow them to first go into the country in their own right, and also to then work. And then in some locations, you are having other options, like the long-term social visit pass, which is available in Singapore and Malaysia, where again, if somebody cannot qualify as a dependent in their own right, as part of the normal tradition, they can obtain visas in other ways.
Brilliant, thanks, Debbie. There's so much going on across the region, and I think, you know, many different changes, and definitely from the corporate side, it feels like the will is there to really move things in the right direction, but still struggling with some of the legislation in certain locations. But
I
thanks
think
for
so.
that.
Yeah, I think so, Kaylin. Sorry, and I agree. And APAC, I think, is certainly a little bit further behind the other, well, particularly the European region, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I'm going to shift on now to our final topic, which is to look at the future. I wanted to take a look at some of the changes that we've been starting to see at Crown in terms of the attempts that companies are making to address these issues of equal, fair, equitable mobility. So that might be something like flexibility in terms of assignment policies. It could be initiatives from the government. It could be a focus on employee experience, which we're seeing very much so at Crown, led by HR or people as opposed to process-led HR policies. So first of all, I'd like to start with Rani. At Page Group, Rani, your purpose, and I'm going to quote this, is to change lives for people by creating opportunities to reach potential. So essentially that's talking about equal opportunities. Can you tell us what are some of the steps that Page Group has taken to ensure the future mobile workforce is fair, equal and diverse?
Yes, certainly. Look, I think for us, global mobility has always been so entrenched in our employee value proposition that it is something that we've always encouraged employees at all levels, irrespective of gender, irrespective of marital status, of age, of seniority, to apply. And we spend a lot of time internally storytelling, promoting that, promoting the international opportunities and almost selling the opportunities to move from one country to the next. So it's a massive draw card for us in terms of retention. And then separately, it's a big piece for us from a talent acquisition perspective. So it's something that we promote in all of our channels to attract talent as an organization. I would say in terms of driving accountability, measurement, and being willing to kind of lift the lid and hold yourself accountable with some targets. So pleasingly for us as an organization, when I look at our APAC moves and relocations into APAC for the last 5 years, it is exactly 50-50 when it comes to gender, for example. We will certainly take time over the coming years to look for ways in which to track some of those invisible characteristics. And, I think that will take time, especially with some of the cultural and legislative issues when it comes to LGBTQ across Asia Pacific. But measurements and targets, keep it simple, that will help to drive change and hold you accountable. The biggest barrier for us is those immigration restrictions.
Right. Yeah, keeps coming up, doesn't it? Okay, so Sham, if I could come back to you. In the past 6 months, we at Crown have seen many of these topics that we've been talking about. So the focus on employee experience, flexibility in policies, virtual assignments, remote working. We're increasingly seeing our clients talking about these and wanting to highlight them. Would you say any of these are making a bigger or more significant impact in terms of diversity of mobile talent?
Yes, Caitlin. So surely the remote working and virtual assignments are the new norm since we got hit by the pandemic, and they are definitely to stay, right? So research has says that employees look forward to moving to a more hybrid remote work models engagement. So they're looking at a virtual in-person work environment versus the remote flexibility that's given to them. They also want the flexibility to decide when it makes sense to go to the office. So this, I would say, has benefited with primarily family care, someone who has the primary family care to decide, what they want to do and when they want to go into the office. The majority of them being women, remote working has allowed this group of people to balance family and work responsibilities. And on another context is what might be a simple trip for you and many of us could be a struggle with those with mobility challenges, really. So the concept of virtual and remote working, it's becoming business imperative. And what I observe is when it's done well, the hybrid remote work improves employee experience, increases the productivity for the business, and enable more inclusive and diverse organization for the company. And another aspect, it's technology, right? So for over a decade, most industries and companies, they have been striving to meet the growing expectation of DIY options and investing in communication platform. The reason for this shift was to bring employees together globally, quickly, and many businesses were ready to meet the challenge. Others were forced to pivot and adapt quickly to catch up. So likewise, in global mobility, there is also evidence that the reliance on technology and preference for self-service options grew over the last decade or so. Despite this, a topic that has remained at the forefront is stark reality that relocations are incredibly taxing. Be it an international or a one-way transfer, this human experience, it's often highly stressful. So there were many early technology startups in mobility industry that started the concept of DIY moves. Most of this didn't offer human support at all, right? So they then had to make some adjustment to their business model, adding experts who could then solve problems and offer empathy when it was required for them to really succeed in that new model that they were operating. Even people who love technology and self-service always want an opt-out option to speak to an expert, I would say. And I'm sure all of us on this call would agree that we would have experienced that while dealing with the chat boxes, the virtual assistants, that they are not always the best suited option when you have a complex or a challenging situation, because you really need that human touch. You want to speak to someone, right? So what has stood out in terms of employee experience and customer experience during the pandemic was shifting the balance between technology and human touch back towards more of human side of interactions, really. So companies around the world found that their employees needed a personal touch, and it's now proven that technology are not to replace human, but to augment the human intelligence because only human will be able to give you that personal touch when you're dealing with someone. So that's what I've seen in terms of the employee experience and customer experience that's been changing, or that has taken a step.
Thanks, Charmin. I think you're absolutely correct. Mobility is such an emotive topic that to dial out the human touch altogether is probably not the best way forward. Okay, so very quickly, Debbie, just in a couple of minutes, can you share your thoughts on where we're going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, from an immigration perspective, the key points are that we need to extend immigration benefits further to same-sex couples. Some countries in the West are adopting equality-based policies, whereas in this region we're lagging a little bit behind. Acceptance of common law partnerships as well, or unmarried couples. At the end of the day, it's not only same-sex couples that suffer from immigration equality. Those that are not married also are suffering the same thing. We are getting some countries that are accepting unmarried partners or common law relationships if they can provide evidence that they cohabit and they have been living together in a committed relationship. But in a lot of locations in this region, that is still not the norm, and work, I think, needs to be done there. I mentioned harmonisation of degrees and qualifications from an immigration perspective. That's really important for dependents and partners who wish to work. I think another side which has been mentioned is also looking at immigration options for elderly relatives. People are living longer now. Especially in this part of the world from a cultural perspective, elderly relatives do form part of a family unit. And if somebody wants to relocate, it's not just maybe the partner and the children, it's the elderly relatives that need to go as well. We have some countries that do allow that now. Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand have options. more work perhaps needs to be done there. And I think basically the idea of some of these protectionist regulations that are in place, you know, this part of the world needs to be very clear if they want to attract talent. There are some things that maybe will need to change to allow the highly skilled workforce that they're looking for, alongside the partners that obviously that will want to come as well, in order to you know, maximize the ability for companies to basically relocate their talent, and also for the countries to benefit from those talents.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. As was mentioned right at the start, I'm just going to check the Q&A box. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. If anyone has a question they'd like to very quickly put it into the Q&A box, please feel free. I'll just give it a couple of seconds to see if anything pops up. No, nothing coming through. Okay, well, with that, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much to our panelists. I think that was a great discussion, and I really hope all the participants that have dialed in found it useful. And with that, I will say thank you. And oh, hang on, sorry, I spoke too soon. Not so much a question as a comment. Thank you for the presentation. I agree fully with the focus that the focus that needs to be on partner employment and untapped talent pool. Yes, absolutely, completely agree. Okay, so as I was saying, I will sign off now and hand back to FX to take us through a couple more slides before we end the session. Thank you, everyone.
All right, well, with that, thank you very much, Caitlin. Just a big thank you to all our panelists and to you as our moderator today. It's been a great sharing of best practices, examples, experience from corporate HR or immigration perspective. So to see how supporting accompanying partners as part of the wider agenda of promoting ED&I in the global workforce and overcome barriers to mobility. So on the screen, it's really 5 trends that we've talked about a bit in the past 1 hour, and certainly those that are driving the changes and the focus on initiatives to really continue promoting ED&I and supporting accompanying partners. So with that, I think the last slide is about asking for your feedback and the QR code. So please let us know and share your feedback by clicking on that, taking the photo of that QR code. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm handing over to David.
Thank you so much indeed. That was a really, really great session. So much to take away. FX, thank you so much for setting the scene at the beginning and also rounding up today's session. To our speakers, to Deborah, to Rani, to Sharmila, really, really fabulous insights. And of course, thank you to Caitlin. I thought that was absolutely expertly chaired. So thank you so much for all of your time today, for joining us. Some great insights, as I mentioned, some much food for thought, and especially around evolving a multicultural workplace in a very diverse world. There was a lot to take away today. So thank you. We really appreciate your time today. I'd just like to highlight a couple of the Chamber's fantastic webinars that are coming up. We've got a Leaders in Business lunch with the British High Commissioner to Singapore on the 25th of November. That has unfortunately sold out, but we are collecting names for a waiting list in case you want to join that. And then we've got another BritCham presents at the beginning of December on Brexit. Where are we now? So that's set to be a really great session too. You'll receive a feedback form from today. Please do fill that in. It really helps me and the team to understand what you'd like to hear more of, where we can help further with you and your business. And that just leaves me to say a final thank you. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to you for joining us. Thanks to the Chamber team for helping put this on. And we look forward to welcoming you to another event soon. Wherever you're dialing in from, have a great day ahead.